if you can open up your bookings before you open your site, because you've marketed it well, because you've generated that demand, it can allow you to generate some income as you're finishing off your site, and that can be a really welcome boost. Having something that's Instagrammable on your site, so a nice sign that people will take a photo of and post on their page, and everyone's going to see it. And it's free advertising, effectively, when people start doing that. And it's not common to see people thinking about that at the build stage or before. Your website also needs to be usable, so when people go on it, there's not garish colours that are jarring, or there's not funny text that can't be read. It's very clear what everything is. There's great information about the area, the site, get people kind of excited to book and stay. And then probably the best feature of it is the ability to book there and then.
Hello and welcome to the Glampitect podcast. Today I'm joined for the second time by Ali Young, co-founder and director of Glampitect and North Coast 500 pods. In our last episode with Ali, we discussed his experience setting up the first NC 500 pod site, but today we're going to lean on his experience with Glampitect, where he's seen literally hundreds of plans for glamping sites. This puts him in a great position to talk about some of the common mistakes he sees prospective site owners making across the process, from the concept stage to planning permission to setup. We also touch upon common mistake established site owners make, so if you already own a glamping site, you might still find this useful, particularly if you're struggling for bookings. Before we start, I'd like to ask a little favour. If you know of anyone who's had even the briefest of thoughts of setting up a glamping business, or someone who'd be interested in investing in something with a great ROI, then consider sending this episode or any other episodes of this podcast that you found useful over to them. That's all from the intro. As ever, I hope you find value in today's episode. Hi Ali, how you doing?
Hi Nick, hello again. I'm glad to be back. I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, good to have you back. Last time we spoke about your journey with NC 500 pods and the mistakes you made and the things that went well and things like that. And obviously your main role now really is at Glampitect, and you do a variety of things. And obviously in your capacity at Glampitect, you see a lot more glamping site owners than just yourself, like you would at NC 500 pods. So, you benefit from a broader perspective, I suppose. And what we're really going to dig deep in today is the mistakes that you often see clients or prospective clients making in their glamping journey. We're going to do it in 4 parts. The first one, the mistakes they make in the early stages when they're dreaming up their site and it's all exciting, but they sometimes make mistakes there. Second stage is when they apply for planning permission, and then when they actually, after they've had planning permission approved, when they're setting up, and then finally once they're up and running, things that they could be doing better there. So we're just going to run through those to start with. So first off, there are some common mistakes that we see, or you see, in the early stages when it's all very exciting or very new and people are dreaming up various schemes and things for their glamping site before they've really got anything on paper. So what are some common mistakes you see at that stage of the process?
Yeah, so the first one, it's not so much a mistake, but maybe it's just a lack of knowledge on development as a whole. So we were in exactly the same boat when we set up North Coast 500 pods. We came from engineering backgrounds, not architecture or development or anything like that. So we learned a lot along the way. A lot of it was to do with costs. We didn't have a good handle on that at the time. So things like construction costs, I've mentioned other things like laundry as well. A surprise to us. So yeah, really, it's one of the biggest things I would say is having an expectation that there will be hurdles along the way, and when the unexpected hits, more than likely you're going to have to spend more money than ideally you'd want or maybe budgeted for. So that could be anything from a survey during the planning process to really needing something like a retaining wall, or maybe a more robust retaining wall that requires engineering input to design and approve. Other things like flood prevention that nobody would think about to start with until they understand their site a bit more. And all of these things can lead to unexpected costs that are just part and parcel of development. So that's the big thing, really. So a lot of that is is really centering around the feasibility, I suppose, which is one of our main offerings now, which, you know, we set up Glampitect to help people in this situation, you know, the situation we'd found ourselves in. And the feasibility was the main way we do that. So we look into some of this and hopefully identify some of these potential hazards up front for people. So that's the main one, really. It really helps understand, you know, the policy associated to your land, and, you know, practicalities like running services and, you know, flood risk and gradient I've already mentioned. But that's probably the main thing, is people have the great idea, they have a vision, but they don't know where to start, and they don't know what they don't know, which is exactly where we found ourselves. I'll probably touch on this a little bit more later as well, but also a willingness to compromise is probably another one. I had very set ideas when you know, when we started to build our first glamping site. I knew what I wanted. I knew how I wanted it to look. I knew how the kind of even down to things like the colors of the materials we wanted to use. I was quite fixed on what we were having. And sometimes that has to change for planning reasons, for practicality reasons. Sometimes you just don't get what you want that way, and being prepared to change and compromise, and that's vital, I think. And, you know, sometimes it comes down to personal taste, and that can be hard to admit to yourself that this isn't the right thing for my business, even though it's the thing I want myself. So yeah, you learn quite a lot doing a development like this, even about yourself.
Okay, so I think the key lesson for across those points there is you've got to be prepared for everything that is in store, because, you know, it's obviously, you know, it's all exciting at the start, but it can be a long road. And, you know, as you say, the cost that you don't expect, but it's also the frustration that you don't expect. You know, planners can be difficult and stuff, and as you say, the surveys and things like that, and also having, as you say, to be prepared to be flexible. Sometimes I think it's Stephen King says you've got to be prepared to kill your babies. You know, you've got to let go of something that you're really emotionally passionate about sometimes for the benefit of the business as a whole.
Although that passion is also, I would say, a prerequisite, because when you do hit these hurdles, and sometimes they can be big hurdles that seem insurmountable at first, having that passion and the drive to you know, see your vision through is essential. That's what gets you through it. It's quite easy to say, oh, that's a problem, I don't know how to solve it, let's not do it anymore. If you've got that desire and that passion, that makes you a lot more likely to succeed and overcome all of these little road bumps.
Yeah, and I also imagine knowing about all the costs and stuff involved beforehand, you know, you can go into it and you can say, oh, okay, I expected this, I can push on, carry on. Whereas, you know, if you're stumped with a really expensive thing that you have to do that you weren't expecting, I can imagine it'd be a lot more demoralizing than you would have first thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, having a good handle on the costs allows you to understand the return on investment a bit more, so that when you do have an unexpectedly big bill somewhere along the way in the build of the site, you can see how it will affect your return on investment. And unless it's an unimaginably big bill, it's probably going to be okay for a profitability point of view. It's your site's still going to make money. It's still going to return investment in a pretty good time, probably. So it helps you to have a bit of perspective into what the big bill, the unexpected cost, actually means for your business.
And then moving on to the planning permission stage, this is probably the most stressful period. As much as you can prepare for something, you never know what you're going to get with a particular planner. You know, common theme we come back to is that planners are humans. Some are nice, some aren't. Some you know, some are looking out for the best for the council. Some might be out to get you. So you know, this is a really tricky stage. It can be frustrating. I remember speaking to Murag at Braveview Glamping, and she was saying, you know, even though we were handling it all for her, she was frustrated. So she can't imagine how bad it must have been, you know, having to deal with it herself. And so what are some of the, you know, the common mistakes that you see prospective site owners making at this stage?
Well, quite a common question we're asked when we're at trade shows and things like that is people that are, you know, quite unfamiliar with glamping and just really kind of starting to think about it will ask us, how do you get around planning? And that phrased that way is a question we're very, very often asked. And the answer is you don't get around planning. You have to work with planners. And that's ideally what you want to do. You don't want to be battling with them. This isn't it isn't always a battle, is what I'm trying to say. Sometimes there'll be differences of opinion, and it can be tricky. And sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes planning applications are refused, and there's nothing that can really be done along the way. But if you go through the pre-planning process, which we very often recommend to people, you're more likely to form a relationship with planners where you're working with them rather than against them. And if you're prepared to compromise a little bit, like we mentioned earlier, then you're starting the right way to develop your site properly. And that has to be the right way to do it, and it has to be a good thing for everyone, so that everyone's happy with the end product. Another kind of attitude towards planning is that we see quite frequently is people not understanding that the planning permission covers more than just installing the pods or the shepherd's huts or whatever unit you have in mind. The planning permission also covers the road access. It will cover the drainage that you need to install. It'll very concerned with the landscape and the habitats and how wildlife's impacted. So it's more the use of the land rather than just plonking some pods on. That's not what you're applying for. There's a lot more than just the siting of units. So that's probably the two big ones. Then once we're involved in a planning application, we often see, not so much from our clients, because obviously we have direct input into this, but we see from when we're doing feasibility studies and we look at other planning applications, quite often the applications are quite light in terms of the content of the documents or the drawings, or even the number and type of information that's been provided. So really you want to be giving the planners as much information as you can to help them evaluate it as best as they can. And typically our packages will have a drainage design, which we don't often see from other places, other applications. Sorry, road access info, landscaping, visualizations can be a really, really helpful tool for that. And that's something we've developed a lot more in the last few months, and we're I would say pretty good at now. So yeah, really, really, what you're wanting to be doing in your planning application is tell the best story you can for your glamping vision to help you tell and sell it to the planners.
Okay, what standard is expected by councils? I know it can vary from council to council, but is it expected to be really professional, or is there a bit of leeway for if someone's doing it by themselves?
I'd say there are some things they will require, types of drawings, types of maps to be used, scales of maps to be used, and how you show the boundaries of your ownership and the site that's going to be developed. But yeah, in terms of quality, there's not really any way they can stipulate it. I would say for a full planning application, you always want to be getting it done professionally, with proper drawings, professionally done. It really helps to describe to the planners what you're intending. Yeah, the other great thing about pre-planning that we mentioned earlier is when you get your response from pre-planning, the planners will tell you what they want to see for a full planning application. Usually they're all kind of much of a muchness. Sometimes there'll be some councils will put more weight towards landscaping or towards road access or drainage, for example. So that can be really good to steer you in the right direction. Yeah, for our packages, we try to include as much as we can in there, which also stops, if you are going to receive consent for your development, it also helps to limit the amount of conditions you might get. So that's something else that people don't often understand is once you have your planning permission, that's not the end of the story. You can quite often still have conditions to satisfy before you can actually start your build or have people stay, have guests stay on your site. And on the back of that as well, for things like drainage, there will be a building warrant required too. So again, we've had this with some clients that haven't been aware that this would be needed, and it's been costs that they hadn't budgeted for. And yeah, again, it's more cost. It's the way development is, that it feels like it can be never ending at times. But if if by including as much information into an application as you can up front, you limit the amount of conditions in theory, and that hopefully reduces the amount of work after you've had your planning permission, which also saves you a bit of time as well. And that can be quite critical, so that you're opening your site when you want to open it. And if you're a few months late from opening, it could be that you miss the best part of the summer season, for example. So that can be a really important factor, especially in the first year of a business. You want to be making as much money as you can to start repaying off your investment.
Yeah. And then just going back to a point you made at the start of that section, about how sometimes people try and get around planning. There are set rules where you don't have to have full planning permission, like I think it's the 56-day rule now, where I won't go into it now, all sorts of minutiae, but in terms of actually trying to actively evade planning and trying to be dodgy, to say. I was actually speaking to Steph Curtis Raleigh in an earlier episode, and she was saying, not on this specific subject, but how glamping has sort of has been able to get away with a lot of being amateurish, really, because it's so quirky and so new that they've been able to, no one's really clamping down on things like, technically, I don't think you're supposed to be able to pick people up from the train station or something like that, or there's all sorts of rules that people aren't actually aware of. But she reckons that as the industry matures, the traditional operators like the holiday parks and stuff might just start to say, hold on, why aren't these growing and big businesses abiding by all these sorts of rules? So I can imagine, maybe there might be some sort of attack on the industry, and particularly those who haven't got planning permission or doing it illicitly. Mm-hmm. They could be pretty vulnerable.
I think the industry's big enough now that we can be fair. We can all play by the same rules. So there's enough demand for everybody, especially at the moment with staycations on the rise. So that's fair, I think. And with that as well, hopefully the planning policy is quite well defined for bigger developments like that, and more well-established traditional ones. So that'd be a welcome addition on the planning policy side for glamping as well. And I've spoken about this before, that glamping sometimes isn't very well described in planning policy, and if there can be better information around what you need to do to design a glamping site for that council, then that would be great too. So yeah, if we're all playing by the same rules, that can only be a good thing. And like I say, there's enough demand, there's enough money for everybody, so why not?
Mm-hmm. And then moving on to the next stage, if you've been lucky enough to have your planning application accepted during the whole setup, you can all the physical stuff like the digging and foundations and stuff, but also maybe in the marketing beforehand, there's a setup stage just before you open up and start making money. And do you see any common mistakes at this sort of area?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I would say they're mistakes, but perhaps missed opportunities. So we always recommend to people, if you have received your planning permission, you probably want to be ordering some units, and you also want to be really cracking on with marketing your site, whether that's through social media or through more traditional forms of advertising and marketing. Then so be it. But you really want to be starting that then, so that you have a demand for your site from day one, and even before, if we're honest. I know Callum's mentioned this in a previous episode. He's really passionate about that, and it worked well for our site. We had bookings before the site was finished, so it meant we had to finish when we said we would, and luckily we did. But it meant we had demand on day one from opening, and our occupancy rates were really good from the start and continued to be high afterwards. Now, the other benefit from that is, I mentioned costs earlier can get a little bit out of, I don't know if I'd say out of control, but there can be unplanned costs. And if you can open up your bookings before you open your site, because you've marketed it well, because you've generated that demand, it can allow you to generate some income as you're finishing off your site, and that can be a really welcome boost. We did that, and I think it was over £10,000 we were able to generate before we'd opened the site, and that really helped us finish off. It just alleviated that financial pressure to some extent, meant that we could finish the site to the standard we wanted. And if you're behind on your development or your build, a little bit of extra income can help you expedite and fight fires and chase, so that you are ready for opening when you want to be to the level that you want it to be at. So marketing's definitely a big one there. Also something that I suppose I kind of touched on this earlier, that people have a vision of what they want their glamping site to be. Now, this is another kind of change in mentality from being somebody that perhaps isn't too business orientated to having a glamping site. Is really what you're doing is you're becoming a business owner. So you want to be thinking about how you can maximize your profits, and that those two things maybe don't go together sometimes for glamping. It can be people wanting to diversify and improve their work-life balance, and maybe they've worked for a number of years in a certain industry and they want to do this to have a better lifestyle. That's great, but you still need to make the business profitable and successful. And one of the ways to do that people quite often overlook is with unique selling points. There's quite a lot of glamping sites out there now, and it can become formulaic if you're not careful. And the way to avoid that is to have some unique selling points. That can be anything from your location next to a great tourist attraction, or you can be integrating hot tubs or saunas, or we've done Amazon Alexas and lights that can change color, controlled by Alexa. Something that you can use in your marketing to distinguish yourself from your competitors. And going back to the start, the vision you have of your glamping site, when you set off, might not tie into that. You might not have considered USPs, and it is quite important. And it can really challenge what your vision was at the start, especially if you realise that what you want isn't the best for your area, or for what your customers want. So sometimes there's a bit of an inner conflict between, I want my glamping site to be like this, but my customers don't like that. They want something else. So you have to swallow your pride at times and really think about what's best for the business. I suppose related to that is a little bit more focused, this one, but having something that's Instagrammable on your site. So a nice sign that people will take a photo of and post on their page, and everyone's going to see it. And it's not free because you have to install something, but it's free advertising effectively when people start doing that. And it's not common to see people thinking about that at the build stage or before. It can be done afterwards, of course, but it's better if you have that from day one, especially if you're going to be really kind of hot on the marketing side of it and try and get some influencers to your site. You want them to have your logo somewhere they can take a selfie and post it to all of their followers.
Yeah, there's a bar, I think it's in Newcastle, where it's like on the wall there's some like angel wings that people, every person under the age of 30 seems to have taken a picture at that location and posted it on Instagram. But yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, something that is Instagrammable, and that can be, as you say, a sign. It could be, a hot tub, could be anything. And yeah, you got to think about all aspects of the business, and marketing is massive in that. And then the final part, once people are actually up and running, obviously there's a lot of glamping sites out there, and you got to try and differentiate yourself. But once you're actually up and running, are there any things that as you say, you might say it might be more of a missed opportunity than a mistake, but is there anything that you see that people should be not doing, or that people should be capitalizing on once they're up and running?
It's probably not so much once they're up and running. If a site's failing, and we've not really seen anything like that where they are failing, demand's pretty good across the country, I would say. But if a site's failing, there will be reasons for that, whether it's marketing or whether it's some form of barriers to booking. There could be a range of things. So usually we'd like to see glamping sites have really good websites. There's lots of benefits to this. The first one is making your, without getting into technical jargon here, making your website perform better on search engines like Google, so that people search for glamping in your area, they're more likely to find you. And there's ways to do that. Like I say, I won't get into the technical details of it because it's pretty boring and it's definitely not my forte. But your website also needs to be usable. So when people go on it, there's not garish colors that are jarring, or there's not funny text that can't be read. It's very clear what everything is. There's great information about the area, the site, get people kind of excited to book and stay. And then probably the best feature of it is the ability to book there and then. I think glamping has probably moved on a bit from its roots, where it was kind of
drop us a message on Facebook.
Yeah, that kind of thing, or it's you know, that kind of quaint kind of farm setting where you go and meet the farmer and they book you into a pod there and then on the day, or you phone up, and that's fine if you want to have that personal touch. That's great, and that in some ways that can be your USP, is that your family run traditional kind of site and harking back to days of yesteryear and all that. If that's something you want to go for, great. But it makes it harder for people to book, and there's I think it was something ridiculous, like 80% of bookings a couple of years ago, I think it was 2018, for accommodation in the UK were done online. And you know, that's a large chunk of the market you're cutting yourself off to if you're not able to book online. And you know, the best way to do that, in our opinion, is through your own website. So having some sort of booking function there is ideal. There are companies out there that will do it for you, and you know, it doesn't have to be something you invest in the website to set up yourself. Although, in our opinion, that's the best way to do it, because it means that if people can book direct through your website, you're taking all of the income. That you can still do that and have access to Expedia, Booking.com, and TripAdvisor, things like that, through a channel manager. So that will manage all of your bookings and speak to these other websites. The other websites will take a cut, but it still allows you to have online bookings, and you know, you're open to the whole market. So you're competing with people in your area as well, which is what you want to do. And it allows you to take bookings all time of day. So if you're only taking bookings at during working hours, then you know, it's not ideal. You want to be open all hours for bookings. Never miss an opportunity, and it allows you to you know, appeal to foreign travelers too. So yeah, that having kind of a working website that's almost autonomous is beneficial, I would say. But yeah, other than that, I don't think there's too much we see from people making mistakes. I wouldn't say you can't go wrong, but it's pretty hard to make mistakes. And if you do find that something's not working, it should be easy enough to change it if you've got nice units and you've got a nice site and everything like that. There shouldn't really be too much that would prevent you from being successful.
Yeah, on the website point, I would argue it's not just about ease of booking and like that is obviously a big point, but also it's brand identity as well. And if you've got a website that hasn't been updated since about 2010, then that might be reflected in, well, customers will probably think that might be reflected in your site. You know, if it's all up to date and it looks really nice, and you know, it's a good start. It doesn't mean that, you know, your site will be amazing, but it's a good start. And I'd argue that's a big part of your brand identity. It also feeds into the marketing things, as we keep going back to.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were comparing two glamping sites in the area and one had a flashy website, it's probably an indication that they have a newer, nicer site as well, and you're probably more inclined to book. So yeah, you've got to think about all these things, and it does matter.
Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that it's almost like it was planned, but a lot of the things we've been talking about today, we do actually offer services in that regard. I think we talked about feasibility, planning, websites and marketing. So maybe you could just give us a quick 2-minute rundown of those sort of services that we offer if anyone is interested.
Yeah, absolutely. So I won't go into prices, I don't think, because that can change a little bit on what people want. But we offer feasibility studies first and foremost. Like I said, that's for people that are really just starting and want to understand what they don't know. So lots of really good information about the planning side of it, planning policy, give an idea of whether or not your ideas going to fly through planning or not. Then on to looking at competitors and return on investment, and we've got a really good way of calculating your setup costs. So you can spend a bit of time looking into this yourself, or I think we can do it better and faster. So it depends. If it's something you want to take your time looking at yourself, fine. If not, give us a shout. We'll happily do that for you. Then on to planning permissions. So I mentioned pre-planning. We like that. It's a shorter, quicker way to speak to the council. The planners won't speak to you unless you do some form of application. So pre-planning is good. You've asked for their opinion. You're working with them. Then onto full planning is where they actually do all the evaluation. They speak to the consultants and sort of the consultees, such as roads and environmental health and everything, to really delve into whether or not your idea is going to be acceptable. And then, we can help with, once you do have your planning permission, we can help with setting up your website, integrating the booking channels, and social media management to make sure that when you are ready to open, or even just before, as we mentioned, that you've got money coming in from day one. Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you for giving up your time again, for coming on a second time. I'm sure we'll have a third time at some point in the future, but thank you very much.
No problem. I look forward to it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Glampitect podcast. I hope you enjoyed and that you found value in today's episode. If you did, feel free to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, as it really helps us move up the podcast rankings. Thank you.